So our next case study after Henry Ford is a gentleman by the name of Paul O'Neill. And when you go to our website that Nalani gave you in the chat room, we have not only the training slides, but there's a chapter of The Power of Habit, the book by Charles Duhigg. Great book. If you like to read, I encourage you to do this, the whole book. But if you only can read a little bit and it's not your favorite thing to do, please at least take the time to read this chapter that they've made available. It's a case study of Paul O'Neill and his incredible business success. You know, we don't have to be the size of Alcoa, who is a worldwide manufacturing company for aluminum, but these concepts can apply to us even in a 1 or 2 person business. So it's an interesting story of Paul O'Neill and his success. And he was the new CEO for Alcoa. They were struggling financially. Safety was terrible across the board in every plant, and they were having big issues. And so Paul O'Neill got selected to be the new CEO. He had a couple months before he was going to start his new job, where he really sat down and thought about how on earth was he going to take Alcoa and turn it around. And so he was a virtual unknown. And if you look at his picture, good guy, but not flashy, just, you know, a regular standard guy, okay? He was a former government bureaucrat, and many people on Wall Street had never even heard of him. For an organization like Alcoa to bring him in was unprecedented. When he was introduced and finally took over and was introduced at the press conference that they held for him, he immediately started off by talking about safety and his intentions to make Alcoa the safest company in America. He intended to go for 0 injuries, and the people in the room were confused. Some of them, the story talks about that they thought this guy was on drugs. He must be some, you know, crazy person, and what on earth has Alcoa done? They ran out of the room and were calling their investors and telling them to sell stock, that this guy was off his rocker. And so he stuck to his guns. He stuck to his commitment and his plan, and he knew something that other people didn't, and that's the power of habit. And so whenever he was asked about how Alcoa was doing, he would always redirect and focus on safety and their success with safety as a key indicator or making progress in changing habits. See, this focusing on safety required the collaborative effort of management and the line worker, which was missing and is a key to success of any goal. So within a year of Paul O'Neill introducing his focus on safety, Alcoa's profits would hit a record high. By the time O'Neill retired in 2000, the company's annual net income was 5 times larger than before he arrived, and its market share had risen by $27 billion. All that growth occurred because at the same time that Alcoa became one of the safest companies in the world, and I would submit because Alcoa focused on becoming one of the safest companies in the world. So before O'Neill had arrived, almost every Alcoa plant had at least 1 accident a week. And once his plan to bring everybody together with a focus of safety was implemented, some facilities would go years without a single employee losing a workday due to an accident. This company's workers' injury rate fell to 1/20th of the US average. That's substantial. O'Neill made one of the largest, stodgiest, and most potentially dangerous companies into a profit machine based on safety. And he did that by attacking one habit and then watching changes ripple throughout the organization. It was simple. He said that you can't order people to change. And boy, do I know that's true. That's not how our brains work. He said he decided he was going to start focusing on one thing, and if he could start disrupting the habits around one thing, he knew it would spread throughout the entire company. He believed that some habits have the power to start a chain reaction, and changing others baits as they move through the organization. Some habits matter more than others in remaking a business and lives, and those he called keystone habits. Things like safety, how people work, how people eat, play, live, spend, and communicate. These all influence our lives. Okay. So the next, I will talk about the connection here in a second. The next is, and our last of our case studies is Dr. Betty Jenkins. or Auntie Betty, as those who know her call her. Dr. Jenkins is the mother of Nalani Jenkins, our COO. Dr. Jenkins is the daughter of Elizabeth Ellis. Many may have heard of her. She was an educator and Native Hawaiian speaker. She's actually credited with being the teacher for today's leading Hawaiian language professors. Dr. Jenkins is a revered elder, or kupuna. She's a lifetime educator, innovator, cultural practitioner. And again, I mentioned she's the mother of Nalani, who's also a musician and songwriter in her own right, legendary. Dr. Jenkins created the 4 Bs, and this is fundamental in our company, and I think has great impact when you look at our safety community. She first created these 4 Bs to unify her students and create a sense of belonging and value with regards to Hawaiian cultural beliefs within her classroom as a teacher. While this was culturally based on Hawaiian values, this can absolutely span across into the workplace. It can be infused into a safety culture, which is focused on unity of effort, value of life, a sense of belonging to a team, and the thoughts and behaviors that contribute to achieving our goals in a positive way. These 4 Bs have fostered and uplifted the value of individuals, the community to work together and to improve quality of life. As a side note, we're supporting the startup of the nonprofit Be Hawaii, which is based on Dr. Jenkins' 4 Bs in human capital sustainability. And hopefully you'll hear more about that to come in the next few months. We're excited about that. But these 4 Bs are believe in a foundational value, safety, preservation of life, human capital sustainability, behave in a manner which practices those foundational values. Those are the decisions we make every day. Implementing a safety management system and making decisions that are right, belong to a community that reflects wisdom, aloha, and foundational values. So your community could be your workforce, could be your family, the community you live in, it could be the crew or the job site personnel that you work with. Our community can be formed in a lot of different ways, where you may say, I don't have impact over my whole organization, but you can impact your community of the people that you deal with on a daily basis. And then the last one is become. And really what we're trying to become is become right and balanced and making good decisions that improve our quality and sanctity of life. So what is the connection to safety intelligence? So the connection between Ford, O'Neill, and Dr. Jenkins may not be obvious immediately, but they're all successful in their different industries and different groups and associations, yet they share many of the same concepts that help them achieve their success. Dr. Jenkins, she had culture within the groups. She created the tone and what was acceptable behavior and the way that they did things within her classrooms and within her community associations they work with. She had a process for learning. She had beliefs and values that were shared and embedded in these groups. And there was a definite unity of effort and belonging within her realm of influence. Henry Ford, he had culture. It was based on innovation and efficiency and improving the quality of life for Americans so that we could all afford a Model T. He had learning teams that put together unity of effort to come up with better systems. And he focused on efficiency that included safety and used third-party experts to speak into his group. And then Paul O'Neill definitely had an impact on culture, focusing on safety and keystone habits and process and things that would make a difference and bring together the gap between management and the worker. He focused on processes and unity of effort, efficiency of his team, involvement from his team, and accountability and keystone habits. In fact, Paul O'Neill actually demanded that his managers know more about what was going on with safety than his own safety manager. So anything worth doing takes effort. And a common assumption is that if an organization implements all the pieces of a management system, even if they're in isolation from one another, the result will be a coherent management system based on all the pieces being implemented. So just because I put all the chapters of my policy in place doesn't mean that they're going to interact properly or that one's not going to negatively affect another. So the interaction, the interdependency of these pieces, they're not considered when we're just putting in place policy or programs. As a result, the pieces don't produce high leverage outcomes that we expect, even if our intentions are good. If we don't focus on the process and how we're putting these things in place, we're not going to get the best outcome that's possible. So the result of this instead is a collection of isolated programs, isolated initiatives, and best practices that potentially function in conflict with one another. They potentially waste resources and minimize positive and desired consequences. So if your current system is successful in operating in isolation, and you have a great program right now, think how much better it could be if it was interconnected to all the parts of the business. Everyone was involved. It's very, very important to step back and think about that. If only your safety department or one or two people are running your safety program, think how much better it could be with the input and influence of everybody else who interacts with or touches it or is affected by it, giving their input and taking away the things that are barriers to high leverage outcomes. So we're going to talk about a couple things. There was a study done, and we're going to look at some of the results from the study, but basically if we lack systems thinking, individuals, groups, we tend to apply what's an oversimplified cause and effect, what we call mental model. And that's just, well, that's the way we do things. I hear that out in the field all the time. This is the way we always do it, or this is just the way that we do it. That thought process, that cause and effect, fails to accurately reflect the system dynamics and the organizational and work complexities. So examples of these efforts and assumptions could be things like improving an accident investigation form to improve investigations, training staff to improve the quality of products, changing a procedure to make a job safer, and modifying a performance measure to improve performance. Each of these are well-intentioned efforts, and they're based on a simple, linear, cause and effect mental model. Solutions are obvious because the problem is evaluated in isolation from all the other associated system elements, the context and the feedback process. And the feedback process is so important, listening to what the people in the field and what the facts tell us. We could be looking at things in feedback and not understanding them or not defining them and not adapting our system to consider these. So here's examples of what we could ask ourselves. How does this change impact other areas? Who else does this change affect? What processes are impacted and how? And what are the potential long-term effects? Does the change improve or hinder the relationships of the system? And does the change produce short-term benefits at the expense of long-term gain? It is crucial that an organization who's seeking to implement a safety management system understand their existing organic management system and understand it truthfully. So this understands how work is completed at all levels. Okay? So we need to look at what we have now and where we want to be and how our system changes affect each piece. So it's important to identify desired consequences for a system, and it's important to understand the current state and gaps. And so we call this a gap analysis. And after a gap analysis has been performed on the current system, we can then define what are the positive consequences that will provide a successful system for the organization. So in other words, what does success look like? What does a safe company look like? What does safety management look like in our organization? How do we know what we've done is good? And I'd submit to you, most people use accident statistics as a measurement. I don't think that tells the full, complete story. I think those things can be manipulated through good claims management or through other processes. There's so many other things to be measuring. So what does success look like? What are the intended end results? What are we going to measure to determine success? We'll put together a free webinar coming up probably the middle of May, talking about leading and lagging indicators for folks. And that's what we're talking about here. What are we measuring? How will the organization recognize it's been successful? Why is this important? And where will this provide us the most benefit? So we need to look at system gaps and define what success looks like so we can move forward. And we want to look at what's working well, not just what has failed. And so our measurements really need to be focused on that. You know, the failure to include occupational health and safety considerations into our work planning that we do can result in unexpected and undesired disruption to our work process, to our schedule, to our material, to our manpower. So just like there's costs associated with poor quality, there are costs associated with poor safety related decisions. And so it's important that the integration of safety be touch every aspect of our business, touch the 10 core business processes that exist in an organization.